Okay, this is a meeting of the Parish of Ascension Planning Commission. It's April 12th, 2023, 6 o'clock p.m. We are at the Ascension Parish Courthouse, 607 East Worthy Road, Gonzales, Louisiana, 70737, in the council chambers on the first floor. Our first item of business tonight is we have a new old commissioner that has to once again be sworn in. So someone's going to do the oath of office.
Yep.
Mr. Robert?
Yes. Mr. Julio Dumas, are you ready to take the oath?
Yes, sir.
Do you solemnly swear to uphold the laws and the Constitution of the United States, the state of Louisiana, the parish of Ascension, and to faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all duties incumbent upon you as Planning and Zoning Commissioner to the best of your ability and understanding?
I do.
All right. You're sworn in.
Congratulations. Welcome back. Roll call of members. Ms. Stacy, please.
Mr. Tommy Noe.
Here.
Mark Villa.
Here.
Nicholas
Miller.
Miller.
Here.
I'm here too. Max Nassar.
Max Nassar. Wade Scheck-Snyder.
Here.
Randy Kluot.
Here.
Julio Dumas.
Okay. Mr. Miller, would you lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the introduction of staff. Stacy, please.
Recording Secretary.
Stacy Webb, Recording Secretary for the Planning Commission.
Jerry Iscari, IT.
Jean-Paul Robert for the District Attorney's Office, Parish Attorney.
Jerome Fournier, Director of Planning and Development.
Sean Chereau, Engineering Review Agency.
Eric Poche, Assistant Planning Director.
Okay, thank you all. Chairman's comments. I really don't have any comments to this meeting tonight except to welcome Mr. Dumas to the commission. He's going to be a very valuable member, and we appreciate having him. If anyone has any desire to comment on any agenda item, please fill a card with your name and the information, and we'll call you up to have a comment during this public comment period. Anyone have any public comments, Stacy? Okay. Staff report. Mr. Fournier?
I don't have a director's report, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Poche, who can go over the subdivision status.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Fournier. Mr. Chairman, you have in front of you the normal subdivision monthly report showing any changes. Not really any changes. Everybody is still just in construction. We do have one final plat, and I do anticipate a few more in the coming months. If anybody has any questions about anything, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions from Mr. Poche? Okay. Any other staff report? Comment?
There's no engineering staff report this evening.
Okay. Engineering staff report, no engineering staff report. The minutes of our last meeting. Has everyone reviewed the minutes, and do we have a motion? Motion by Mr. Kluot to approve, second by Mr. Scheck-Snyder. We're going to cast our votes. Okay, there we go. Motion passes, 7 yeas. Next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. We have an affidavit of mortgage declaration, Tred Bourgeois, Lot 8, 12463 Beco Road, Santa Monica, Louisiana. Item B is affidavit of mortgage declaration, Christina and Roy Hurd III, Lot B2B 40 Pocarello Drive, Gonzales, Louisiana. We have final plat approval, Windsor Park subdivision. This is the first filing. It's quality engineering and survey. Okay, do we have a motion? Anyone wish to remove an item from the consent agenda, or do we have a motion to approve or deny the consent agenda?
Yeah, I'd like to remove the final plat approval
Okay.
from the
Yep.
consent agenda. I just have a few questions.
Okay,
from
motion
staff.
to remove the final plat approval from the consent agenda. Do we have a second?
I'll second
Second by Julio Dumas. Mr. Dumas, let's vote on that, please.
All I can get is to
Yeah,
speak.
but point of order, you don't have to vote on it if somebody objects.
All right, okay, well, then we won't vote. I'm sorry, no vote necessary. So the final plat approval, Windsor Park subdivision, first filing, quality engineering and surveying is removed from the consent agenda this time. Do we have a motion to adopt the remaining items on the consent agenda?
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Scheck-Snyder, second by Mr. Miller. Any discussion on that? No. Let's cast our votes, please. This one we do vote on. Here we go.
Then this becomes item.
Okay, motion passes, 7 yeas. That goes to the,
Goes to the last thing.
after the new business?
Mhm.
Okay, so the item, final plat approval, Windsor Park subdivision, first filing, quality engineering and surveying will be placed back on the agenda as item number 14B. Next agenda items, number 12, public hearing to approve or deny the following family partitions. The first one has been removed. The item was removed from the agenda prior to the meeting by staff as it did not meet the Ascension Parish Unified Development Code, Appendix 4, Section 17, 405F2, the public notice requirements. That was for Albertine A. Palms property, lots 5A and 5B, by Norman Land Surveying, LLC, Council District 11. The next item is Burris L. Parent. I say Parent, how do y'all say it? Parent? Parent property, tracks X2A and X2B, Earls and Associates, LLC, Council District 10.
Yeah, James Fago representing Earls and Associates. I'm Mr. Robert Smith Jr. on the following family partition, asking the commission for approval. All we're doing is taking his property and dividing up half acre in the front so his parents can build a house.
Okay.
There's an existing servitude of passage already getting to the property, actually through the property.
Okay, any, do we have any public? Okay, no cards for public comment. So do we have any commission discussion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Scheck-Snyder, second by Mr. Miller. Any discussion at all, commissioners? Let's cast your votes, please.
He's got to set it up. Tell it to go.
Who's not? Okay, the motion is approved, 7 yeas. Thank you, Mr. Falco. The next item is item C, Leroy Robert property, Lot 2A, 1A, 1C, 1A, and 2A, 1A, 1C, 1B, Earls and Associates.
James Fago again, representing Earls and Associates and Garino family on his family partition, asking the commission for approval.
Stacy, have we any cards for public comment?
No.
No public comment. Commissioners?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Kluwat to approve, second by Mr. Scheck-Snyder. Is there any discussion on the motion? Let's cast our votes, please. Seven zero, motion approved.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You're welcome. Next item on the agenda, item D, is Jimmy's Lounge Incorporated, property lots A2A and A2B, McClin Taylor Incorporated. Council District 2.
Ellen Jackson with McLean Taylor Incorporated, asking for your approval. Representative Family Partition by Ms. Dayla Guidry.
Okay, do we have anyone wishing to comment publicly? No cards. Okay, commissioners? Anyone need any information, questions, conversation, motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Scheck-Snyder. Commissioners, any conversation? Okay, let's cast our votes. Motion is approved, 7 yeas. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Item 13, ordinance, is a public hearing to recommend approval or denial to the Parish Council amendments to the Ascension Parish Unified Land Development Code, that is to amend the Ascension Parish Unified Land Development Code to add Appendix 15, traffic calming. Mr. Fournier.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, before you is an ordinance recommendation to the full council to take the residential and parish-wide traffic calming policies and procedures manual and place that in the Unified Land Development Code as Appendix 15. This was distributed to you some time ago, and basically the manual provides a palette of options available to the parish, developers, and property owners to place traffic calming measures within a subdivision, whether old or new, or on parish roads, all right? What we'd like to do in this first item that's on the agenda tonight is just recommend that this manual be placed in the Unified Land Development Code. You had asked me to have someone here to discuss traffic calming measures, and he's here for both this item and the next. Mr. Richard Savoy, who is from Gresham Smith. Mr. Savoy is from South Louisiana, as you know as soon as he starts speaking. Great man. Has worked for DOTD for over 35 years as a senior engineer. And really knows his stuff about this, and we're pleased to have him tonight to talk about this item.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but Mr. Savoy,
Thank you, Mr. Nassa.
I think that I think Mr. Fournier missed one little tidbit in your CV. I believe you were either chief engineer or deputy chief engineer for the Louisiana Department of Transportation.
I was the deputy chief before I became the chief engineer. It's just a small thing, you know. It's not. It's nothing. You know, I prefer the senior transportation engineer title, Mr. Nassa.
Okay, well,
to be
I'll
honest
take
with
my comment back.
you. That's okay.
It's on you now.
No pressure here. No pressure. I work for Gresham Smith out of the Baton Rouge office, and we were asked to come before you. I know y'all received a huge document, I think was prepared by Sigma Consultant Group out of Baton Rouge. And as it was explained, there's a plethora of ideas that you can use or take out of that manual to do traffic calming. As it was explained, more than likely it would be best implemented if that's what the council so chooses to do in a new subdivision.
because it's easier to incorporate some of those measures into something that's existing or is going to be planned from the beginning. To implement something like that in an existing subdivision could be more of a challenge, but it would require some study. It would require some participation. More than likely, in an existing subdivision, it would come from a complaint from someone living in that subdivision, whether it's speed. More than likely, it's going to be a speed complaint. I happen to live in a little one-street subdivision here off of 74, and luckily for our subdivision, we've got a four-way stop sign intersection right in the middle of the subdivision, so speed is not an issue. But there are some that we've looked at that exist in the parish that have lengths of roadway with no traffic control from maybe 3,000 feet. We looked at some stuff in East Baton Rouge Parish. I think East Baton Rouge Parish does have something in their policy as far as traffic calming. Some of it in new subdivisions, little roundabouts, little circles to kind of slow that traffic down when you have a long stretch of continuous roadway without any traffic control. So it would probably, from an existing subdivision, it would probably come from a complaint. And it would probably require somebody to go out there, meet with the complainant, maybe have the council member that represents that district go out there, look at it, maybe do some speed. I looked at some, just a little tidbit of a joke here, but I looked at some traffic calming measures that some woman in her robe standing in the front yard with a hairdryer trying to implement that she's got a radar gun, So just joking aside, you'd have to look at some speed that would be out there, but more than likely you're looking at roadways that may have lengths of maybe more than 700 feet, 750 feet. But I think that's something that we, on our side of the fence, made some comments on the policy. If there was to be some revisions to it, would be that the developer would come in and recommend traffic calming, or if he didn't recommend any traffic calming, he would explain when he brought his subdivision for approval as to why he did not. Maybe it's at a location that he would provide the right-of-way for a future circle, not maybe constructed at this time, but maybe something in the future when, if speed did become a problem, that the area or at that location would be wide enough to implement some type of circle for traffic calming. In an existing subdivision, more than likely you're talking about speed bumps. And, there's many of them that you can choose from to do that. Some of them people just jump over. They have a lot of them I know in South Downs and Baton Rouge. But again, there's all kind of measures you can implement. But the position would be is that it's the best on the front end when a subdivision's brought for approval, and possibly have some area reserved for a traffic calming should it be needed. But I'll be glad to answer any questions within my abilities. If not, we may have to get back with y'all.
Well, I do have a few questions.
Sure.
None of them are too difficult.
All right.
I think you should.
You should have told me if you had any softballs for me, Mr. Nasser, but that's okay.
So there is something that's called the the Manual Uniform Traffic Control Devices.
Correct.
How do these traffic calming items integrate with the MUTCD?
Well, you'd have to look at the MUTCD and see what they would recommend for certain situations. For the most part, you're talking about speed. What could you use? You'd refer to that manual because it's a good reference manual for all kind of traffic devices. Some of I think all the new subdivisions now must come with a sidewalk. The subdivision I live in, Plantation Creek, doesn't have any sidewalk. Some of the issues could be with pedestrians and the combination of speed with pedestrians, but the MUTCD is certainly a manual that could be used and to look at. I'm assuming the SIGMA document included a lot of stuff that came out of the MUTCD.
Okay. And then I have a question. You mentioned that the developers would, when they presented their plans, they may have some recommendations for some traffic calming devices to be implemented at the inception of the development.
Correct.
Maybe some could be brought in later. It would be important to me, I believe, to have one of the parish's independent traffic firms review those proposed traffic calming measures offer an opinion on whether or not they're appropriate and they would work in that particular scenario, as opposed to the developer being the one who determines that.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. You know, if he brought in and he had a traffic calming device or a little circle, let's just choose a circle, and he said, this is what I think it should be done, is that he should have some engineering justification for it. And I think that's what you're asking for.
Yes, sir.
You know, on the converse, if he didn't, there would be an engineering justification as to why he didn't implement the circle.
Right.
You know?
So, Mr. Foyne, that'd be important to me to have that. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I wanted to let you know that the first item that we're due to discuss on traffic calming is to take the manual and put it in the ULDC. The second item was to talk about how we're going to implement the measures in that manual.
Okay.
So if we could maybe just, at your discretion, just maybe.
Yeah. So I got
approve-
ahead of myself.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
sorry.
already on the next
I'm
item.
sorry, but I
I'm
just
sorry.
wanted to make sure we kind of did it in the proper order.
Okay, so let me go back to commissioners. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Savoy relative to our recommending approval or denial of this document to the parish council?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mr. Miller?
How are we recommending this to the council as being able to implement? Are we recommending that there's parameters that we've already addressed and accepted? And that once we recommend approval, they're going to address those parameters and requirements for implementation?
The first item, all we're asking you to do is take the manual and put it in ULDC. The second item we get to, we're going to create the policies. That's what's up for discussion.
Okay.
And let us know how we're going to implement the items that are in the manual, okay?
So
I'm sorry about
13A
the
is simply
confusion.
us saying, yes, we can go forward with discussing a
Yes.
procedure.
Okay,
On
so-
item B, we'll talk about the procedures. All right.
Okay, so do we have a motion whether or not we want to recommend to the parish council to, I'm sorry, Mr. Dumas? Yes, sir.
So the first thing we're looking for is a motion to recommend to the parish council that the manual be adopted as part of the code.
Yes.
Precisely, yes.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Dumas.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Miller. Or is there any further discussion? Okay, let's cast our votes, please. Seven yeas. Okay, motion is adopted. Don't go anywhere. 14 A's. Now is the discussion on the application and implementation of traffic calming measures. So I go back to my previous comment. Thank you for that answer. As well as my comment on the review by one of the parishes on contract traffic firms. And I have a question about speed bumps. And that question relates to, there was a time in history, some 30 years ago, that municipalities and political subdivisions wouldn't implement speed bumps because of liability. So if we're talking about speed bumps, has that changed in any way, or the courts, or is the opinion towards speed bumps and liability? Should someone hit the speed bump, damage their car, go off the road, run through a house, or whatever, has that been addressed in the courts of late?
From a legal perspective?
Yeah, huh?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any right now, personally, but we might defer to legal counsel on that. Maybe we can ask Spencer next and do some research on that, but I'm not aware.
I mean, I don't think we need an
legality.
action on that right now. It's just,
Yeah.
it's part of the discussion. Mr. Dumas?
Right.
I was just going to add that I think speed bumps have sort of evolved. There used to be this, nice, round, short, aggressive speed bumps. Today, they tend to be more subtle, but yet, very impacting, without being as
Still effective, but I would assume you'd have some warning signs in
yeah,
advance of the
warning
speed bump too.
signs, right? And I mean, there's a bunch of them in South Downs where I used to live in Baton Rouge years and years ago. That old subdivision today has many of these implemented
Correct.
into them. And the speed bumps are not, let me put it to you this way. If you're going twice the speed limit, you're going to regret it. But if you're not, the speed, you're not going to get damaged. I think the speed bumps are now more sophisticated, a little bit more evolved.
Right.
For lack of a better description.
Yeah.
I think that the traffic engineer, but someone, I would hope that an applicant would look at this as a requirement of his design of the subdivision and would come in here realizing that this is an issue and it needs to be addressed. So I'm hoping that the applicant, we should have, at least in the application process, a question that says, have you looked at traffic calming, procedures to address your long roads?
We can certainly create a policy that would have that in it, all right? And that's, I think, what we'd like to discuss right now is what those measures are. Are we going to have every subdivision that a preliminary plat look at traffic calming measures? That might be prudent to do, depending on how the length of the streets. Some of the recent subdivisions that have come before you have been, 30, 40, maybe 50 lots, very small, streets aren't very long. Is it appropriate to have it there? These are questions we can look at with our experts here and come back to you with a policy and kind of expand on the one that we had in your packet.
I would like to see recommendation on length of road, number of units, number of lots. Four-way stop intersections rather than just to, stop on one way. Anything, I'd like to see recommendations from staff.
Okay.
Mr.
I think, Mr.
Schechter?
Nassa, I think you bring up a good point as far as implementing some of these measures on a parish-owned road. And if the parish approves that to be installed, I'm not an attorney, but one would think that the parish would have some maintenance and liability of it, unless was requested by an HOA, and that's a possibility too, with the understanding that the HOA says, we want it installed, we're going to be responsible for the maintenance and liability of it, and then, somebody can draw up that agreement if that's what needs to be done. The other issue would be is when it's not in a subdivision, like Duplessis Road or, the Tiggy Duplessis Road where I've traveled that, so I know how hard it is to go, to hold 30 miles an hour.
Right.
It's a narrow road, it's got big ditches. So what do you do when there's no HOA to do that? One would look like it would fall back on the parish for maintenance and liability on something that's not in an HOA-controlled environment. So just offering my 2 cents here.
No, that's why you're here. We
Yeah.
want your 2 cents.
Thank you.
Mr. Schechter, you had comments?
I do, and it's kind of multi-pronged approach. While I do believe in the traffic calming techniques and the practice in general, I think it's absolutely necessary. I think that we just have some issues that we're not answering at this time, and it's making me very hesitant about moving this forward. If you look in the main packet in the manual, one of the things in the manual, section 8.1, funding. Funding must be secured first and, for these type of calming measures. So I'm also asking, what type of funding measurements or funding, avenues do we have in place for this? We have Move Ascension, yes, but in the brand new subdivisions that are adopting the road millages, that is a funding, mechanism. But in the other unincorporated portions of the parish, we have no real funding mechanism for this type of maintenance. So I have an issue wanting to put something in place when we have no real way to support it, or we may be inadvertently putting in a maintenance issue that can just drain too much money. Now, we do have we did pass a resolution, and the council passed a resolution recently. We want to, on these new subdivisions, keep our millages high on those, and those monies can be used for maintenance, such as calming techniques, and use that money. That's fantastic. I wish we would have done this 10 or 15 years ago, though. And now where we're at, the real issue is we're not going to have very many subdivisions approved over the next 5 to 10 years. So if we make all these changes, are we really making an impact? And that's just a concern of mine. And then, whenever you mentioned Tiggy Duplessis, that's exactly where I was going to be. I'm against the implementation of speed bumps. I just cannot support it. I used to live near Tiggy Duplessis, and Goodyear got a lot of extra money from me due to those speed bumps. I just don't see that that's where we need to have as a calming measure. So I'm just not in support of that. And then my last comment is when we're talking about on the appendix, and this would be more in generalized for older subdivisions, we're going to recommend, or these HOAs might be petitioning for calming measures. And of course, the first thing they're going to want to do is have speed bumps, speed humps, or anything like that. But the maintenance, the funding for it, and then the liability, I think the general public are very unaware and ignorant about what is going to cost. And then at one point, I'm wondering, are just the taxpayers going to end up footing the bill? So I just don't really support it at this moment, the way things are written. I think we need to really come back on this. And that's just my opinion right now.
I do have one comment to build a little bit on what Mr. Schexnayder said, and I think we're looking at a couple of different strategies. You're looking at implementing traffic calming devices in new developments. It's a much greater challenge when you talk about retrofitting something. Right. Because you've already got a certain geometry that's in place, you've already got a certain traffic pattern, you've already got something built. And so I think it needs to be looked at two different ways. It can't be one size fits all. That's my opinion. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I've got some questions about, again, I'll second the speed bump thing. I don't like it, because as you stated, Mrs. Sabo, a lot of these older neighborhoods, they don't have the pedestrian ways, sidewalks and whatnot. So the kids are riding their bikes across these speed bumps. And quite often you see it, down Southwood Village, they break, and now you've got a piece of rebar sticking out the blacktop that just punches a hole in somebody's tires, and causes more of a problem than versus, so now they're swerving around, completely avoiding the whole purpose of the speed bump altogether. So I wouldn't want the speed bumps. My concerns are with the implementation such as the requirements. I saw there was something in there about a traffic count less than 400 cars would mean that one was not needed.
Yeah.
I think if 399 cars are going by my kid on a bicycle, that's safe. But if we get to 400 and now she's in jeopardy, I see where that could be problematic, because you're not going to have a 400 count car in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
So then is the developer simply going to say, well, we're not going to have 400 traffic counts, so we don't need to implement this. So I think that, that's the part that I was asking earlier about, during the discussion A there is, how are we going to determine when these measures are required? And I'd like it to be clear on that so that the developers and everybody knows coming to the table, these are the things that we need to address, because we're fixing to see the situation here. Once you get to the final plat, hey, we've already put everything in place that was there. We're not required to make any changes now. I think it would be beneficial, because to have this laid out prior to everyone getting there and knowing, we got 100 and something pages that we had to read through and pick out, exactly what we're going to put in, what we're not going to put in, for us to come and discuss that today and say, yes, it is, or no, it's not. Is that the idea there? Of everything in that second packet?
Well, the second thing that we get handed out, the traffic calming policy measures,
right,
was the discussion. All right, so we're not saying that this is what should be or shouldn't be. This was for discussion points. All right.
Okay.
So
I guess what is our action on this now?
One of the things we envision, though, is that if a HOA or someone else makes a request to have traffic calming measures placed in there, we're not just going to go in and put them in there. We want an engineer to look at this. Right. We want an engineer to look at the road network and give us their best advice as to what type of traffic calming measures should be placed in there, and how and when and everything else, right? So
what is our action on this discussion as of right now? What do we need tonight? Are you asking us to approve that? Are you asking us to simply just?
No, we don't need approval on this. It's for discussion.
Okay.
But what we would like to do as staff is get feedback from you, and then we'll come back at the next meeting with an actual policy that we can have you look at and approve and ask that it be forwarded to the council for approval. Right?
So I think I would like some type of working group that involves, some of us, the staff, maybe even the transportation committee if they're,
That's fine.
involved with this as well. I
That's
think the
fine.
traffic impact fees that are under the new development may be able to address some of Mr. Shakespeare's funding concerns, but that, like you said, that's only for the new development.
Now,
The older stuff is going to.
Yeah, let me state that the traffic impact fee program, the fees that are collected for traffic impacts are for capacity, increasing capacity, not for safety, all right?
Right.
Two different things.
So they wouldn't even be applicable.
So they're not
for these
available
measures.
to us to be used for traffic calming measures.
Right.
It's only for capacity.
Wait.
Okay.
So, I'm gonna get with you in a minute, Mrs. Dumas, you too, Mr. Sheikh Snyder. On Mr. Miller's comments, the 400 vehicles, I kind of agree. That's a heck of a lot of vehicles. And so, just as a comment, I want to be sure that whatever the policy is, whatever is recommended, is more than a feel-good measure.
Okay.
I see too much of that in the city where I used to live, where a lot of laws are passed, and everybody cheers, and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
So we need to have a policy that's beyond feel-good.
I'd like to point out, though, the 400 traffic count is average daily count.
Yes.
Not peak hour, right?
Yes,
The big
yes.
difference. And so, typically, I think the ITE specifies that one single-family detached home generates 10 trips per day. So that would be, 40 houses? 40. Yeah.
10 trips a
That's-
day.
that's
I don't
what
leave-
my
I don't
boss
leave
said,
home
so-
that often.
But when you look at,
Yeah.
if you look at 400 peak hour trips, that's a totally different.
Yeah,
animal.
okay. So, that's what all I'm asking, is that clarity that we
Yeah.
know what in each of these scenarios is being implemented and
Yeah.
the developers and everyone as well.
And then one more comment, primarily for the commissioners. There's a group that is called AASHTO, AASHTO. AASHTO has a policy on traffic calming, and you can go there. It's online. It's the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. You can go online and you can read their policy, become familiar with their policy, and it may answer some of our questions. Mr. Dumas.
I was just going to say, from my perspective, you need to treat new development and existing developments completely different.
Yes.
We would agree.
I think new developments, you got an open book of what to do. You have the opportunity to take an intersection and just say, okay, we're going to four-way stop this intersection. That's a significant calming issue. Existing development, I think, you have two. You have those that have private streets that belong to an HOA, and those that have public streets. And I think you need to treat those in your recommendations separately as well, because, in a subdivision where there's a public street, there may or may not be an HOA. So there may not be an association to request it or fund it. So it could be that in a subdivision that has public streets, the only option that might be available to the parish that's affordable is to just simply change the traffic control on an intersection from one set of stop signs to four-way stop. That may be the only opportunity you have that's affordable, that the taxpayers can absorb. I think the timing to do this is important, is good. I mean, if you're not watching the news, you see that there's this new sensation that we're gonna drag race everywhere. Okay, so I mean, it's, for whatever it's worth, Jerome, those are just some of the things that pop right into my mind of how you should bring it back to us.
Yeah.
Is to recognize that you have two primary categories, and one of those is gonna have two subcategories.
Can we get that working group going for these discussions?
Sure. I'll leave it up to the chairman to kind of appoint the working group. We certainly would
Mr. Schexnayder.
entertain that.
Mr. Fournier, another question I had is, how would these traffic calming measures come into play whenever we're starting to talk about level of service at intersections and such? We really harp on any of these intersections for impacts on new subdivisions have to be at a C or greater and such. But do these traffic calming measures on the existing roadways, if they're taken into account, is it possible that they might lower those, inadvertently might lower that level of service due to speed and a lesser capacity? I mean, is that something that we're taking this into account?
Well, we'll look at that. I'm going to have to defer to the experts on what traffic calming measures would do to,
that level of service is going to come up, and so that's something that I really am curious about.
And maybe Mr. Savoy could have.
Well, I would think that part of the traffic calming measures is to try to get people to adhere to the posted speed limit. And I would think that most HOAs that did come, with a complaint or wanting an investigation is saying, our subdivision street's posted for 25, but I promise you everybody's going 30 plus. So, from a level of service standpoint, I think that traffic calming is just to try to calm people to get to the posted speed limit. How many people said they've posted their cruise control exactly on 70 when you travel on the interstate? We all fudge. But again, in the subdivision where you have pedestrians, I know I run on the street. There's no sidewalk. But I have confidence that the people are going to adhere to that four-way stop sign in the middle of the subdivision. But I think traffic calming, the principle is to try to get the individuals to adhere to a posted speed.
Well, the level of service at an intersection is volume based on the number of trips that are standard coming in and out of subdivision. It has nothing to do with speed. It has nothing to do with people
out there quicker.
Right.
doing this.
And the reason I kind of bring that up is, one of the traffic calming measures that we've seen in that's, I don't know if it's necessarily been effective, but Government Street in Baton Rouge.
Right.
One of the traffic measures, calming measures, they called it Government Street Diet, where they changed the lanes.
The road
So
diet.
we now have a capacity reduction on that road. Now that they thought that this was going to help, it was going to calm things down, it was going to slow things down, but now we're facing more of a delay, even a further delay, because the capacity is so much lessened. And I'm thinking not just in HOAs, not just in subdivisions, but again, where we're talking about Germany Road being a long, drawn-out road, Tiki du Plessis Road, those other types of roads that people do tend to speed on, yes, but whenever we start trying to implement a traffic calming measure, that is a major thoroughway. And so do we have to have some other ideas involved in that? And I'm just asking questions on it.
So one of the things that I think we should also consider, I mean, we talked about ADT and we talked about LOS. I think we also have to think about geometry, of the roadways. I mean, we have 16 feet, we have 18 feet, we have 20 feet, we have various curvatures and things like that. I think that should be a consideration also beyond the number of cars. How is the street constructed? What does it look like?
That would very likely come in when we've been asked to put traffic calming measures in place, and we hire the consultant to go out there, the traffic consultant. That's one of the things that they'll have to look at, obviously.
Yeah, I think that would be addressed by your earlier comment, with the traffic review agency being able to understand that, the land itself and what's available there. And the infrastructure in place and say, here's what's doable and not.
You can have a radius that's a very soft curve, or you can have a stop and a right turn. You can, a strong 90. I think that and also the width of the road, curb, no curb, all those things to me would come into play, and I think it should be considered. Commissioners, any other comments?
No, that's my only other thing is the transparency of knowing what is going to be required by everybody and how to implement it prior to getting into it, you know. And that working group, I think, would be a big help.
Mr. Fournier?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Joey Turo, who's in the audience tonight. He's our traffic guy, he's our road guy, and he's going to retire in a couple of weeks.
What?
And so we won't be seeing him.
Richard.
And, but we thank him for everything that he's helped us with, and, you know, especially as it relates to roads and things of this sort. So we're going to miss him dearly. If he has any comments on traffic calming, you know, you might
Mr.
welcome
Turo,
him.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
I understand you and Mr. Sabo at some level were colleagues at the DOTD also, huh?
Mr. Salvo is far too modest. With DOTD, he had a very important chief engineer position. I'm humbled by being called the parish chief engineer because a DOTD chief engineer is a high-pressure position. I mean, it's only the tough can handle that, and Richard did it admirably.
A full head of hair when I started.
Right. And I'm just the parish chief engineer, and look at me. But I do get a lot of calls about traffic calming, plenty. I don't get calls about saying that you know, I can't go fast enough. It's always calls about the speed is dangerous. Y'all had mentioned Duplessis Road, and I'm aware of everything, all of the drama that was with Tiggy Duplessis. So I understand those that do not want any traffic calming at all. I'll take that back. They don't want any speed bumps at all. But there's other technology out there, other tools out there, like speed tables, that I happen to be a fan of. I've seen it in other parts of the country, and it works effectively. There are signs warning you that a speed table is here. So, you know, if you tear up your vehicle with a sign staring you in the face, I don't know, I'm not an attorney, but I would think, you know, it you know, kind of relieves your liability in that case. I've got, and I do have to harp on Duplessis Road. I do have, you know, input in the plans of Duplessis Road. It's going to be reconstructed in the next couple of years. I personally included speed tables on that road. I'm not sure if this panel or if the public in general will go along with that. You know, and I'll be glad to discuss more, you know, in a side meeting or whatever. I did discuss it with the police, the fire chief, because there's a fire department right there on the site. He was reluctant at first, but whenever, you know, he had the envisionment of a speed bump, which I know is not, it's effective, but it has a lot of drawbacks in that it, you know, it does jar people, it makes a noise and all that. Speed tables tend to not do that. You know, I guess unless you really drive crazy, but that's what the speed table is there for. We've had a lot of run off the road accidents because people just drive too fast on Duplessis. It is a through road, and people use it as a through road robustly. One thing that was brought out by the fire chief in that after we had the discussion, he was actually on board with having some speed tables, and we're just talking about in that stretch having maybe 4 or 5. He said, well, at the end of the Duplessis Road, St. John is right there. There are kids that go to that school church. It's a church school. He recommended to put one there, especially. He was okay with the other ones, but he said especially we ought to put one there, and I agree with that. So that is, you know, this is not a retrofit. This will be in the construction of Duplessis Road if everyone is in agreement with that, and I think it would be. I get a lot of calls now about the speed, and it's a narrow, pitiful road. whenever we redo it, it's going to be a nice road with 11-foot lanes, 2-foot paved shoulders. If you think people are going fast now, you wait then.
Yeah.
And I guarantee it's going to be a problem. So I think it needs to be addressed, but it's up to us in this room and council as to whether we address it now or, we put up with the repercussions.
So, Mr. Turo, we thank you for your comments.
Sure.
I think they're very meaningful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with the speed tables there. I think they have one by Mall of Louisiana, I think. They have one by the Mall of Louisiana, I think there is.
Not sure.
But I
My
think that
son
would-
lives in Maryland, in Belleville, and it's kind of a planned community kind of place, so they have the tables there, and it's a passenger car. Both tires are actually on the table.
Right.
So it's not an abrupt bump. You actually, go up, and it's got signs saying speed
I think it
table.
would certainly be, effective in addressing, Mr. Dumas's old neighborhoods problems where you don't have a lot of extra room, and as well as Mr. Nasser's comments as well. So it could be an effective measure.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Mr. Fournier? Anything else, commissioners? I'm sorry, Mr. Cloutier. Not Cloutier.
As we move forward with the crafting of this
I know a
ordinance,
guy,
what I see is, once we have new developments and subdivisions come before us, is that we don't funnel this ordinance into certain traffic calming measures. I mean, obviously with this manual in here on my iPad, there's hundreds of pages, there's hundreds of different traffic calming measures that we leave it open because every subdivision isn't gonna fit every traffic calming measure. Each subdivision is gonna require a different look. So I just say as we move forward is don't narrow it just to specific traffic calming measures that we're only gonna adopt. Is that we leave it open and that when it comes before us and the developers look at it and we look at it as this is what we recommend from an engineer, an expert, and this is what we implement.
That was the purpose of putting the manual in the,
Right.
because it does outline numerous traffic calming measures that can be implemented. And we don't want to focus on just one or two. We want to have that palette available to us, during the design of a subdivision. All right, so you're right. Yeah, thank you.
Commissioners, any other comments?
Nope.
Thank you, Mr. Turo. Thank you, Mr. Sapwa. Okay, the next item on the agenda, I assume that discussion is completed. Next item on the agenda is the return of the final plat to the agenda from the consent.
We still got those two mortgage declarations.
Where are they?
No, we already did. Huh?
We already did those.
Oh.
Yeah, we just finished item 14. And now we're going to go back to the final plat approval, Windsor Park subdivision, first filing, quality engineering and surveying. So you're from quality engineering and surveying?
Yes, sir. Good
Very
evening. George McCallum with Quality Engineering.
Okay, so you have any comments before we begin our discussion?
No, sir. I'll just, whatever Mr. Miller's questions are.
Okay, well, hold up. Do we have to have a public hearing on this? No?
No, this was a consent calendar item.
Okay, all right. Mr. Miller?
Yeah. The street connectivity requirements to have more than one exit, were y'all pre-approved prior to that being put in place?
I believe we were.
So y'all not required
Eric-
to have more than one exit anymore?
So
Right.
I can answer
Yeah,
that question for you.
Mr. Schechter and I discussed that yesterday, so he's
So-
got the story.
Yeah, Windsor Park subdivision was approved before we had that requirement in place.
Okay.
Quality Engineering, as a developer, they did offer to have interconnectivity.
I saw that.
During that timeframe of, and I wasn't a part of the commission at the time, but I do remember the meeting. During that time, it was requested by a lot of people to eliminate the connectivity.
Right.
So by all parties agreeing, connectivity was eliminated.
Well, and that brings me to the question, is it, having just discussed I think their chief concern was the additional traffic and the speeding through those neighborhoods, with the traffic calming measures in there. Are y'all planning to leave those connect avenues in place so that if it does become?
Those connections are there in case something happens in the future and somebody wants to move forward with the connectivity. I remember one of the comments was, that the neighboring subdivisions just were absolutely against it.
Right.
So, just a point of information, based on everything I read and learned, as this subdivision went through the process, every step of the way, quality engineering and the developer met all of the requirements and the requests of the planning commission, whoever the planning commission was at that time. So to change something now would be to go back and remove something that was previously approved.
I don't believe you can change it now. The council has legislation
Yeah,
that says that
that's
once
what I'm
we get to the
saying.
final plat, you can't. So-
Right, that is what I'm saying, because I support connectivity.
Right.
But,
Yeah, I'm just, I know.
I
last
do
time-
appreciate the questions, though.
Yeah,
If you wasn't in it from, and I wasn't in it from the very beginning either.
Right.
So,
What was the waiver for the sewage for?
that was, I think it was because we're tying into the existing, we had do you remember what that waiver was,
Yeah,
Eric?
the way was that now that the public has voted to sell the parish assets on the
Right.
sewer system to NWI, the consultants, developers are asking for waivers because the sewer ordinance is still written so that it requires a developer to dedicate the system to Ascension Parish unless a waiver is granted. So they grant them a waiver so that they can donate the system to a private third party, since they're going to end up owning it within the next 6-8 months, year, whatever anyway. And that's what that waiver's for.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question there, is are you set up to tie into, I know they're gonna put that new plant over there on 42, are y'all set up to
Yes.
tie into
We are
that?
set up, we're tied in.
Okay, good deal.
Yeah, they tied in.
What about the drainage issues? I know there was a couple things that needed to get addressed, a little
There was a few
housekeeping,
drainage
rat killing,
issues,
before.
from the punch list you're talking about? Yeah, everything was addressed.
I know, I've heard lately, something over there in the Conway area seems to be having some problems. I just wanted to, I'd hate for y'all to have that same, issue to deal with. So everything's been fixed?
Yes, sir.
Department's, inspected and we're good on that? Yes. Okay. I've got no other questions.
I don't think so. Mr.
Motion to
Dumas,
approve.
did you have a question? Okay. I didn't see it, but,
Well, then I'll make a motion to approve the final plat.
well, actually, Nick made a motion, so you can second it.
Yeah.
Motion by Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Scheck to approve the final plat. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
7-0 is approved. Motion to adjourn? Mr. Dumas beat everyone to it. Second by Mr. Scheck, motion by Mr. Dumas. We have to vote.
No. No, we're not.
Y'all refuse to vote on the motion?
So moved.
All right. No objection.